Good morning and welcome once again to Monday Manna. I'm your host, Frank Adams. I want to talk with you today from Daniel chapter 7, verse 25, a message that I've entitled A Little Known Tactic of the Devil. The Bible says in Daniel 7:25, King James Version, and he, the Antichrist, shall speak great words against the Most High, and shall wear out the saints of the Most High. And to think to change times and laws, and they shall be given into his hand until a time and the dividing of time. In 2 Peter chapter 2 and verse 7, in the Amplified Version it says, and he rescued Lot, greatly worn out and distressed by the wanton ways of the ungodly and the lawless. And he rescued righteous Lot, greatly worn out and distressed by the wanton ways of the ungodly and the lawless. And the definition of the word wanton ways, it actually has a reference to unrestrained sexual relationships. And so here is Lot and his family living there where they lived. And the Bible says that righteous Lot was rescued. And when they found him, he was greatly worn out and distressed. What was it that wore him out and distressed him? It was the unrestrained sexual promiscuousness of that current age. And so godly Lot, or righteous Lot, was worn out because he lived in the midst of this cesspool. The reference, as I mentioned in Daniel 7:25, is to the Antichrist, whose spirit is already working in the world. Notice one of the strategies that he uses against God's people is the wearing out of the saints. This tactic is very little known, but it is and proves to be extremely effective. So I remember years ago hearing Bobby Bowden, the coach of the Florida Seminoles, and they asked him in a game against Blue Devils of Duke, they asked him, Coach Bowden, what's your strategy for this game? And he replied that we want to run as many plays as possible and wear out their defense. The wearing out of the saints is not unusually, or it is not usually sudden, but gradual. It happens a little bit at the time, imperceptible, but very effective. The devil wears out the mind of God's people by filling them with anxious thoughts. The enemy wears out our heart by filling it with fear and apprehension. The enemy wears out the saints physically by attacking their body. And he attacks the spiritual lives of the saints by averting their affections away from Jesus Christ into other things. He attacks our commitment by inviting us to flirt with the pleasures of the world. He attacks us financially by seducing us with all of these credit purchases. He destroys our strength by stealing our joy in God. The joy of the Lord is our strength. To wear out means to make or to become useless for any continued use. Basically, like Coach Bowden, he wears us out, then we're useless to resist him. He has succeeded in taking us out of the game. To wear us out means that It means to be spent, to be wasted, to be consumed. Well, the question is, of course, how do we defeat this very effective tactic of the devil? Well, let me give you 3 ways illustrated for us in the dynamic of the family relationship of Martha and Mary. You're familiar with the story. We find it in Luke chapter number 10. So if we are going to overcome this little tactic of the devil, which is so effective, so efficient against God's people, then there's 3 things that we learn from that interaction between Martha and Mary. Number 1, if you're going to overcome the tactics of the devil, you've got to live with an eternal perspective. Luke chapter 10, verse 42, Jesus responded to Martha, said, Mary has chosen the good part, which will not be taken from her. In other words, Mary was living not from a perspective of the immediate, but from the perspective of the eternal. Mary had an eternal perspective, and it was reflected in the choices that she made. Martha had a less than eternal perspective, and it reflected in her choices also. Martha made much of physical food and serving, but Mary chose to feed her soul. She had an eternal perspective, which gave her that dedication to be with Jesus rather than taking care perhaps of the immediate and the mundane. The perspective that you live from is determined by your values. And your values influence your choices, and your choices impact your character, and your character will eventually determine your eternal destiny. The Bible says, if in this life only we have hope in Jesus Christ, we're among all men most miserable. It is possible to be a Christian and live a miserable, worn out existence. Jesus loved Martha. Jesus loved Mary. Jesus loved Lazarus. There was no partiality between them. It was the perspective and that determined their values and their choices. Martha's busy serving and preparing. She's exhausted. She's irritated. But Mary is sitting at the feet of Jesus. And her sister Martha is filled with anxiety in her much serving. Mary had an eternal perspective, and she was putting her spiritual life above everything else. But Martha, or rather Jesus, loved Martha, loved Lazarus, and loved Mary. The things that matter most must never be at the mercy of the things that matter little. Perspective involves seeing clearly, including all of the variables that may play in a decision. God is the only one who sees all things clearly. He has perfect perception and perspective. God's perspective is called truth. Choosing God's perspective is called wisdom. So if you're feeling worn out, beat up, cast down, then perhaps you should ask yourself, have somehow I slipped from my eternal perspective, and I've allowed those things that are most eternally and currently the most important thing in my life? Am I busy about doing 100 other things that have no eternal impact? They're just busy things. And I'm losing my way with God because I'm neglecting that relationship. My friend, it's time to fit an eternal perspective, vision inside of your life. Let that eternal reality determine your values and your choices. So if you're going to overcome this little known tactic of the devil, he wants to pull you away from the things that really matter little, and you abandon the things that matter the most. Wonderful that Mary has chosen the good part, and it will not be taken away from her. So, my friend, what perspective are you living from? What perspective is driving you today? Secondly, if we're going to overcome this little known tactic of the devil, which is wearing out the saints, then we need to start living a prioritized life. In Luke chapter 10, verse 40 and 42, the Bible says, "But Martha was distracted with much serving, and she approached him and said, Lord, do you not care that my sister has left me to serve alone? Therefore tell her to help me." And Jesus answered her, "Martha, Martha, you are worried and troubled about many things, but one thing is needed, and Mary has chosen that good part which shall not be taken away from her." My friend, she was sowing into her eternal, prioritized life. Notice the many things of Martha and the one thing of Mary. Martha's many things left her worried and troubled and angry and frustrated. Wearing out the saints, trying to keep all of your balls of your life in the air at the same time and all of the plates spinning, makes for a very unhappy and joyless Martha. Webster defines priorities as being first or taking precedent. The precedent for the believer is seeking God and his kingdom. I know that we have to work. I know that we have to work on our house and we have to prepare meals. But my friend, we never do that and abandon our pursuit of Jesus Christ. That is a tactic of the devil to move you away from your eternal perspective and your prioritized life and get you to just be wore out doing stuff that has no redefining or reinvigorating you. They just continue to wear you out. You're on the treadmill and you're just exhausted trying to keep all of those plates spinning in your life. My friend, only one thing matters. Only one plate needs to be spinning, and that's the plate of your personal relationship with Jesus Christ. No matter how much how busy you get, my friend, control the flow into your life, much like the handle on a faucet. Don't let it take you away from living an eternal perspective and a prioritized life. Here's number 3. You must live a personal life with Christ. Wherever you're at, whatever you're doing, nothing takes the place of a personal, ongoing, intimate relationship with Christ. Now, the enemy will do everything. He'll fill you with busyness. He'll fill you with good things. But my friends, you must say, that has to wait. That has to take the back seat for a moment. I want to make sure that I have my personal, ongoing relationship with Jesus Christ. Martha was distracted. Mary was devoted to knowing and experiencing Christ. Martha's distractions left her dissatisfied. She was dissatisfied, disappointed, and disturbed. Had Mary helped, it would not have resolved the conflict inside of Martha. We should not be satisfied with anything else than sitting at the Master's feet and receiving the things that he has to impart to us. All of these other things need to be done and will be done, and God will give grace to get them done. But my friend, if you keep being seduced by the enemy and he's wearing you out, so that you're just busy doing all these things, these motherly things and fatherly things and ministry things, that you neglect to live your life from an eternal perspective. Learn to live in a prioritized life, and learn to live in a personal, intimate relationship with Jesus Christ. Work and diligence are virtues, except when they distract from one's personal relationship with Christ. Bill Hybels has written a book entitled, I'm Too Busy Not to Pray. When our activities distract us from Christ, we're too busy. We'll be worn out, no use to ourselves, our family, or to Christ. Slow down, eliminate the perfectionist performance mentality, and just stop and sit at the feet of Jesus. Wait on the Lord. He will renew your strength, and you will accomplish more in that mentality and that heart condition than you would have if you just busied yourself trying to tie up all of your loose ends. My friend, remember, when you feel yourself being worn out, that you need to stop, get that eternal perspective, live that prioritized life, and live your life in a personal relationship with Jesus Christ. My friend, God bless you. Go with God this week, and may He grant you victory over all of these things that just press in us and press in on our lives. God bless you, my friend. Have a great week.